Oh, works. What are we talking about? So it's 7:30 and I organize this one as a sort of lightning talk. Means there is no demo, there is no code. It's more just like a chat between friends, a chat between people, and some findings I was able to find in my daily work in Amex, and also talking with somebody who's technically not here, in other financial companies, mainly about the damage they already did with their graph. So that's me. It's the same slide of the last time 1 year ago. So you can find, it was like on YouTube. Well, where's Benji? It was like on YouTube 1 year ago. So you can go back and you can see that I'm an engineering director in American Express. I work a lot with GraphQL. I love to say I build information systems because if I want to build code nowadays, just coding AI can do. In some cases better than me. System and architecture is what the AI probably doesn't really do correctly. I love GraphQL. My links are there. Easy peasy. Challenges of federation. So everybody knows this, no? Subgraph A, B, and C. The color is fun. It's probably a standard thing in almost any in almost any GraphQL solution where we use federation. Supergraph, you put all things together, okay, and then you suddenly realize, oops, cohesion and coupling. I came to this 10 days ago or 2 weeks ago. It sounds like an anti-pattern of 20 years ago. When everybody said, oh, but in the mainframe, because we used to talk about mainframes when domain-driven design and all the news came in, like, too many things to it together. Is it trouble? Is it trouble managing? Is it trouble testing? Is it trouble running? And I was thinking, but when I think about a supergraph and I stitch everything together, or I join everything together, don't want to necessarily talk about stitching, it sounds more or less like the same problem in a modern way. And effectively, what I found that I was thinking about, but there are so many pain points in testing a federated environment, which depends on that. And there are too many teams involved in testing without a clear scope. I need to tell myself for reading. Often overlooking important parts such as mutation. 90% of the people I talk with, no, we're not testing mutation. Interesting. And with too many implicit contracts. So, okay, you have 3 subgraphs, probably 3 different teams, simplifying because they can be more actually. Let's say there is a n+1 because somebody else is managing the gateway. Generally, who owns the subgraph, who manages the subgraph doesn't manage the gateway. There is somebody else managing the gateway. At least in what I found, probably some implementation is different, but commonly is like, I have like a CRM, inventory, things like that. Everybody's exposing the subgraph, and then there is like, oh yeah, they manage infrastructure, they also manage the gateway. Somebody else, nice. Who's doing what? Who's managing the contract here? Because how are we really dealing with this API? There are too many people. Who's testing everything? I'm still waiting for an answer. So we do an amount of technical only testing. Yeah, the problem is if you want to know, like, I press the button and something came back, it's easy, and this is what we do. So everybody does like unit testing. Technical only, okay, it doesn't test any contract, it's fine, but an engineer does unit testing, and also with some bias, sometimes they make unit testing to do or to prove what they wanted. So it's not really TDD as another approach, fine. Then you maybe do a fun solution like you inject in your subgraph query testing. So you automatically test after the unit test your queries. You mock some query, you mock some data, there is some data flowing in and I'm getting what I want. Yeah, fine, it's all tech. Does it mean anything? I mean, it means it works. But does it deliver what you want? I don't know. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And doesn't account for a system that meets and maintains the business contract, because there is no business contract into that. The engineer or the engineering team managing that doesn't necessarily think about the business contract, which is like something different. Does the information mean anything? And I'm still testing on the subgraph. When I go up, and I also think about the supergraph, who's managing it? Because if I build the UI, I can connect to the subgraph, I know, but generally speaking, I connect to the supergraph. I don't want to know anything else, no? I'm just connecting to that. Who's ensuring is really mating the contract there? Is anybody testing it? Question, probably no. Which came me also to think about this interesting principle. With enough users, all observable behaviors of your system will be dependent on by someone. I don't know how many know about this one. It's, it's not famous as Murphy's Law, okay, but it's a real one, no? So my API has been working that way for ages, yeah. Has never met the business contract we wanted, or the acceptance criteria if you use Agile, but does something. Yeah, but the something is not written, is all implicit. So if you want to improve testing, or if you really want to stress test, not in terms of performance, in terms of all the test unit you want to run, does it really meet your needs? You don't know. Or probably you think, but you'll never be able to test it. End of the day is like, we got too many tests that do not represent real use cases because we base them on tech. I'm reading a field and getting a field. I found this pattern common even in REST world, no? People exposing REST API. Yeah, you get it, no? How many people, generally speaking, got troubles with swaggers where there is a field like age and it gives you probably the number of legs of your cat, which is all normally is a constant, should be 4, okay. The description of the field changed over ages, it doesn't match what you get, so people used to use the API, they know what to expect, is untestable technically, is testable only technically. I'm reading a string, I'm getting a string, I'm reading a number, getting a number, and maybe with an enum, if they're all documented, and many times they're not, because in a REST API it's not like graph, you look at the schema, you see all the options, no? You don't see with REST. Maybe you get a new one tomorrow, your system is gonna break, so it generates trouble. Overusage of regression testing, that's another thing I found commonly, we keep running the same queries in production in the new version before releasing that. Okay, and? So if nobody's querying that field that has been in your graph for ages, you're not testing it. If I added a new field, because there is no production query, actually using that field is new, you're not testing it. Fun enough, with arguments. You can do many things with your arguments, nobody's testing them, because anyway, I created options for my consumers, fine, fair enough, okay. No consumers using those options, okay, it's a shame, so I'm not testing them, because I'm just replicating production queries. I would even add, how did you find your production queries? If you use persistent operation, maybe you have a storage, you can get them, no? But in other cases, what are you going to do? Are you trying to mine your logs and find all your queries? I know somebody did that and also told me, when I discover my log goes back in time only 30 days with those data. So a query not frequently run, but still available in your website somewhere, that maybe is used only in a specific use case, was not tested. Because it just went back 30 days. So another problem. Forgotten mutation. Nobody wants to talk about mutation. But we got a problem, guys. Who's testing the mutation? Who's testing that maybe you made a very small change and the signature, the call effectively you make to simplifying REST behind the scene has changed. So you're not passing that magic field which makes your REST API to completely bankrupt, like 500 doesn't work, so your mutation is affected. Did you test your mutation? No, and even if you Google on testing best practices for GraphQL, testing opportunities, testing options, nobody talks about mutation. I think it's an interesting case. Lack of limited testing at the gateway, nobody tested the gateway. I manage my subgraph, I test where the gateway is, somebody has a problem. Limited testing of contracts across subgraph. So, a friend of mine in another financial institution broke in production because somebody made a code change and the parent was not passing correctly after the change across to subgraph. However, test on the subgraph, all done. Test on the subgraph, all done. Test of the gateway, never done. And when you make a query that goes here and here, you break. So who's testing that? there is a problem. You're not going to find if you test within your subgraph, because you just test a chunk of your schema which is there. You don't test those use cases, which are an interesting problem, no? And even all the coverage tool, they generally do not really report, am I testing all cross points? The last one, limited mocks. So it's another thing where nobody wants to take, nobody wants to say a word. How do you manage mocking data? Because either you have a fantastic, futuristic, very modern and mature system where you create test data. I mean, that's a financial company, create test account, I would say, no? And they go around all the system, they're aligned, or there is a problem. And again, I can mock data from my system and say, I don't know, customer orders and something. So there is a key I use for joining those two information. If I mock data here and I don't mock data correctly here, I won't be able to make a real test. So mocking the data is a problem. It's not just about using tools where, let me think, Mukun, if you know Mukun. I can read the Swagger, you ingest the Swagger, and it generates like a dynamic mock. Does me nothing, honestly. I mean, I know somebody tried, honestly, and, but it doesn't work when I make a query that goes across 5 subgraphs. Obviously it doesn't. So what's the value of Mukun? Well, there is a value in the tool itself, but it's the way you use the tool, which is limited. Oh, so that's an idea. And I'm not saying anything new to anybody, BDD. Probably everybody knows what BDD is. I'm looking at your heads, yes. So you should probably apply BDD in testing your GraphQL, because ultimately what you expose is a contract that needs to be some kind of business criteria, business needs. No, have UIs, they expect to see customer data, financial information, whatever. So if you use BDD correctly, you are forced, or somebody, maybe your product, we go down into how an organization is effectively implemented, but your product, both, honestly, you are forced to think differently, okay? So can help making your test meaningful when apply gateway level with dynamic mocks works even better. Because if you get the static mocks, you're not necessarily gonna go far. If you just use BDD within the subgraph, you are still stuck. So there is a problem there. And however, to be successful, testing should be driven by real business use cases. So it's not like if this enum can be like A, B, and C, let's mock, Mukun has like one of A, B, and C. That's not really a use case. Another friend of mine made an interesting mess where they did not test. In a particular scenario I cannot remember, but there was a change, and the change was a change in a field that instead of returning, so the field is supposed to return an array of objects, okay, or null. In a graph, it's easy, no? When you define in the schema, it's easy. Now the change was, instead of null, now returns an empty array. It seems a stupid change, you know? The stupid change broke the UI in 2 countries. Now, the UI was not built in a very good way, and okay, let's take like 50% of the problem is there. But what is the other problem? The other problem is they didn't test it because all the tests were based on, so my main country is Europe, actually technically in that case is Germany, so they just tested for a German customer and the German product. Yes. And when you try to do the same in an Asian country, I think was Thailand, where customers are different, products are different, just the list of the certification a product must have are completely different, they didn't do it. So release in prod in Germany went pretty well. Overnight, I mean, nobody noticed in Thailand. Thailand started working and nothing works anymore. Oh yes, the null has become a empty array and the UI, still a problem, doesn't manage the empty array. But why did not you test it? Because you made some test just based on a BDD technically. The bias in that is a tool called Karate. Or Karate, I don't know. So probably you know the tool. When you read it, it talks about BDD, but it's a BDD for software engineers. It's really tech, okay? It doesn't necessarily represent the business. And if you lose the concept of the business, the concept of the data you move, you're not able to successfully test what you do. And probably it's like, why do you want to do that? End of the day, you model a schema, you model like your application because somebody in the famous business, double quote, gives you some kind of need. Okay, that's my business need. If you use Agile, feature, stories, acceptance criteria, it's all like business driven. Why do you want to make everything tested from a tech point of view? It's limiting, no? And the limitation can kill. And the bit is the semantic contract. So you want to establish, check, control, maintain over time a contract that meets your business need. So you need to look at the information, not at the data. If I give you a spreadsheet with an amount of stuff in columns, that might not say anything to you. If you think about the information or what those data mean, then maybe it changes a lot. So you make a query to your graph. From an engineering perspective, I don't get any error in the payload, it's all fine. Well, is it? Maybe it's telling you, it's just mismatching, no? Instead of Stefano Cislaghi name and surname, it gives you surname and name. It's a very simple thing. You don't notice it because you just try to find a matching to your data, no? Double equal or triple equal, depending by the language. It's not. So the semantic contract is a problem, particularly when you want to test something which is on the edge with UIs. So immediately exposing information to customer. UI is not going to do that check. Maybe they should. Somebody does some kind of UI testing where finally very famous, it's not A/B testing, but there is literally a human or a colleague testing like, okay, I'm trying to do those things, do they work, do I see what I expect? They normally do because they want to test if the UI works in the way they design the UI. So they don't really put the focus on the quality of the data, information coming back, but it's a problem, no? And the last bit is this, customer journey driven. Now, you can add one thing on top to the BDD. The BDD itself is like limited. I'm testing, I create, I don't know, a transaction for a credit card, a bank account, and whatever, I don't know, a loan, okay. It still doesn't necessarily make sure your UI will carry on working in the same way you want. Probably you go close there, but it's not 100%. 100% is, as a customer, I log in, I do some stuff, I potentially change some other stuff, and I log out. Well, nobody logs out, I know, but okay, Benji does. And I log out. That's the journey. You should be able to test the journey. When you use BDD in a good way, BDD gives you some, literally on Cucumber website, no, they give you some kind of input and direction. No? You want your test case to be, I think literally the first one is like user logs in, okay, and start with that. You should put all those test cases together. Now, you have a journey, then like that's a global company, many companies are global nowadays, no? Customer journey, Stefano in UK, Stefano in US, Stefano in any other country, okay? Each country has a small variation. When you do all those tests and they all pass, then maybe that's all fine. So only when you test an entire journey and it works with all its variations, then you can be sure your API is not breaking. Otherwise, you have an approximation. I know in some cases you need to balance, like, do I have time? Do I have resources? Do I have money also? Okay. Do I have tools, which are a problem always? But that's really something to consider. You cannot just limit to a very tech test. A collection of tests, even if business-driven, are never enough. And you always forget one, the one which is breaking. I mean, that's a golden rule I wrote here, and I probably defined here, but I think it's a market rule, okay? The one you miss is the one breaks. I probably there is something similar on Murphy's Law if we check, okay? And we still have mutation outside the scope. Now, coming to an end, because I don't want to boil anybody, in my opinion, a good reference architecture for doing real testing in a federated environment is, first of all, the span should be gateway down to the subgraph. Everything below, you don't have any control. Maybe you have in some cases, but generally speaking, you don't have any control. Forget, okay? Everything above, you don't. But you cannot just limit yourself to a box, the subgraph. Second is you need to mock your dynamic data based on real world scenario. You can't just make a dynamic mocks based on swaggers. They mean nothing by default. So don't do it. If you do it, you already accept like another step back in the confidence of your testing. Measure the coverage, don't rely on regression. Regression doesn't cover everything. Well, regression is regression. People can have point of view. I don't disagree with regression needs to be done, but that's not a way for saying I'm testing 100% of my application. You are testing 100% potentially of your application running in production, and probably to an approximation, maybe the 99.9, because you always miss something when you look at the logs. Consider to cover all the intergraph, and that's a very bad verbiage technically, connections. So you need to be sure there is nothing that breaks while it goes across subgraphs, because nobody thinks about that. It's the first thing which is completely breaking your query. I'm pulling out the name of a customer and all the orders. I get the name, nothing else can be from orders, and I get an error. So if I think like a UI, well, that's probably is a big like no paint with an error. Sorry, our systems are not working. Test mutations with real world scenario. If I can go change, I don't know, what shall I change? I change my delivery address. Okay, somebody automatically or manually should try to change the delivery address. And because of the architecture, you need to be sure the change coming out from here, which probably will be a REST API call in many cases, so I know, you can call it database, but like the calls coming out from here is the same used to come in the version n-1. Otherwise, there is a potential problem. Unless you agreed a change with the contract, a change in contract with the backend API. That's doable. That's another thing, no? Test expected error behaviors. It's again another thing nobody's really doing. It's like, oh yeah, when I make this, there is an error and I'm expecting an error. Well, UIs, they get error messages and they build logics around error messages. So paint, no paint, conditional paint, show message X, Y, or Z to the customer. It's not just about I'm expecting an error. If the UI has to tell me, please correct your address, your country is wrong, or sorry, we can't make any update, all our systems are down, is because the error message contains something they're using for driving this logic. So it's not just about, do I get an error? Yes, you probably get an error. But if you change it, instead of telling the UI, instead of maybe informing the customer and say, oh, you need to change your country, or the country you provided is not valid in this case, no? No, sorry, you can't make any change, which means the customer is going to phone in, causing other problems to the company. Last one, own the platform testing, which is again like here. Somebody has to own this, okay? If it's this subgraph, this one, the gateway, all together, somebody has to own. And the golden rule, I think, everywhere is the shared ownership doesn't really work. So somebody has to own. You cannot just say, the most important subgraph does test for everybody. It will never happen, I'm pretty sure, okay? There must be a formal owner. Everybody's probably accountable of testing, okay? But the owner and the person who's going to sign off changes, it needs to be one person, one team. It doesn't necessarily matter. It cannot be shared across everybody. And that's the end. Any question? No question.